Good morning. My name is Matthew Watson. If I haven't had a chance to meet you, it's good to see you. It's so good to be worshiping with you this morning. Missed y'all. Missed this time together. I do want to add my voice to the chorus of those that have expressed gratitude to all of you and to all of you that are kind of out there as well that helped make this outdoor worship service possible. Thank you to the production team, Mike Bell and Alan Grove, their detailed list of how to get us from point A to point B. The summer task force with the breakfast, hospitality, stage crew, worship teams, all the teams, prayer teams, just everyone that sort of came together to bring this, make this happen. I thank you to all of you for setting things so that we could come together this morning and remember God's promises to us, God's greatness, God's goodness, and His rescue of us through Christ. Now, each of these things that we've experienced, even so far this morning, in our service, sharing a morning meal together, prayers together, saying the Lord's Prayer, singing together, preparing for other avenues of ministry that are just on the horizon, Nats games and backpack drives and other things, celebrating our young people this morning and being able to see the ways that God is at work in their lives and moving them forward in a purpose, the planning, the giving, all of these are displays of God's love towards us. Everything that we've done so far. It's a gift from God to us to remind us of His great love. And individually, any of those things, just individually, they give us a glimpse into God's character. They show us things like God's provision towards us and sharing breakfast together. They remind us of God's presence towards us and the prayers that we have prayed earlier in the service. They remind us of God's awe and God's majesty as we sing and lift our collective voices. It reminds us of our purpose together as we bear witness to the passionate pursuits of our young people. And taken together, they show us not fully or completely, but certainly faithfully, they show us what kind of God it is that we serve. What kind of God we worship, what kind of God that we sing to, and what kind of God that we look to in times of trouble. And so and here we are, able to participate in all of that because different ones of you helped us gather. Different ones of you gave and prayed and planned and prepared, and you practiced in different moments. And some of you cooked bacon, and some of you rented like generators and tents, and some of you met with the teenagers to get a sense of where they were going. Some of you helped set up live streams, and others of you simply lent your presence and your gratitude and being here. And when we gather together, Christ City Church, it's not just a few folks that sort of put this on. It's not just a few folks that sort of bring their gifts to bear for a Sunday service, but rather it's a communal effort. Different gifts and different abilities and different availabilities all brought forward so that we can gather together and remember that we worship one Lord and one Savior, Jesus Christ, who is at the center of all of it for Christ City Church. So whether you've been here for hours already, Nikki, I see you. First one here, 6 a.m. Make sure they set this tent up. Giving them the business, which way to put the tent posts. So whether you've been here for hours already, or you just arrived moments ago, all of it, all of you are important and necessary for us as a worshiping community to remember and to celebrate Jesus' work in our lives and through our lives. So I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you for being here. I was hanging out with some friends. I was with the Bells the other day and the Nishizakis, and we were talking about phone numbers. How many phone numbers can you remember? You got a phone number that you know. I got 3 kids. All 3 of them got phones. I don't know now one of their phone numbers. I know it starts with 202. After that, I don't know, man. How many phone numbers do you remember? We were talking about it, and I was sharing with them that one of the phone numbers that I remembered was the one as a kid that I would dial when I wanted to get time and temperature. This was back in the day. It was a dedicated phone number. I know some of y'all are like, what? Yeah, didn't have an app, didn't have a Google, so there was a phone number you could call, 214-844-4444, and it would, Republic Bank Time tells you, here's the time, and it was a temperature. So if you were like setting a clock, setting your, VCR, or you just were like, how hot is it outside? You would call the number, and they would tell you, you would hang up and go forward in your day knowing I know what time it is, like properly what time it is and how hot it is. As we were talking, so we went through this. I found out later, by the way, this same phone number is like in other cities. I thought it was just in my town. It's like just change the area code. So we did it. Like I called the one for like Redding, California, and it was like, oh, it was the time, but like 4 hours different, and the temperature was different. I was like, yo, but it was the same pre-recorded, same voice, everything. I don't know. I felt cheated on, frankly, by the time and temperature number, but. But I went on to tell them that there's also these other phone numbers. Many of them sort of sprang up during the pandemic, but there were these other phone numbers where you could call and they would play songs from different bands, mostly from the 80s and the 90s. And these numbers have become more meaningful to us, more meaningful to me than I would like to admit. Are you aware of this? So there's one that's for Phil Collins. It's called Phil Collins. You would dial, yeah, there you go. I knew you appreciate that one. 424-888 Phil. You call it up. Phil, it's free. There you go. Don't do it yet, but later over Pancake. So you would call it up, and the prompt would come, and it would give you 4 options. You can dial 1 if you want to hear Easy Lover. Dial 2 if you want to hear Against All Odds. Maybe you're sort of in a romantic mood. You want to hit 2. Number 3 for Air Tonight. By the way, you can hit 5 if you just want to hear the drum solo on repeat. Or number 4 is Susu Studio. All right, I don't know which one you're going to dial. I was Against All Odds last night when I was making sure the numbers still work. The other one that I found is for this old band from the 80s called, the band was Hall & Oates. Okay? This one is called Call & Oates. All right? Sort of get a theme there. You can reach them by dialing 71926 Oates. That's OATES. Don't leave the E off. All right? British lady shows up. Prompt, invite you. You can press 1 for one-on-one if you know their music. 2 for Rich Girl. 3 for Man Eater. Anybody familiar? You guys are like, yeah, okay, perfect. 4 for Private Eyes. That was a new one. I actually didn't even know that song. So there's others as well, but my favorite of all of these, my all-time favorite, is actually, let me see if this will work. Siri, call Rick Astley. Oh, yeah. My man. 90s pop phenom, redheaded British kid. Took the music charts by storm in 1987. Rick Astley. With his hit, Never Gonna Give You Up. I love that one for a couple reasons. First off, there's no prompt. Like, you just call it, Rick just starts singing. I don't have to bother with pressing some number. Like, I just call it, Rick immediately starts singing to me. And I love that. The other thing that I love is I love the song, right? It's the reminder that he's never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around or desert you. The other thing that I appreciate about this is that it's actually a phone number. It's like somebody that you can actually call. Like, I just imagine like Rick's over there just waiting for me to call him up. Oh, it's Watson. Let me just sing the thing to him. That he's just like he's there. And he knows exactly what I need when I call in that moment. He's just there with the right words, knowing what I need to hear. But I still got to call him, right? Like, I still got to, tell Siri, what the what is. It's still something for me to do in order to hear Rick sing to me. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus has a similar invitation to us. It's a passage that we've read and explored before, especially during our Learning to Live sermon series and discipleship journey. Matthew 11, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus says, come to me. He says, come to me. Something for you you got to come to me. But I will give you rest. Take my yoke, the burdens that I offer, which really aren't burdens at all. Learn my ways, and you'll have rest for your soul. The way that the Message translates this, it says, get away with me, and you will recover your life. The invitation that Jesus offers is the invitation to a life that's full, that's meaningful, that's restful, that has purpose, that is generous. But there's something for us to do too. There's a step for us to take. Our step is a step towards Jesus. Ours is to follow Jesus, to trust Jesus, but that's it. And on the other side of that step is a full life. Throughout this summer at Christ City, we've been making our way through a section of the Psalms called the Psalms of Ascent. It's 15 Psalms, kind of in the middle of the Psalm, Psalm 120 through 134, that were sung by the people of God as they made their way to Jerusalem and to the temple to worship. We've been preaching through them, and we've been preaching through them when we've gathered in person for worship, in moments like this. But we've also been praying and reflecting through them as we've been walking through our online summer devotional guide. I hope that you've taken advantage of it. That guide, like so much of our services, has been put together by the people of Christ City, artists and writers and poets and worship leaders. The psalm that we had read today, and that we'll be reflecting on this week, is Psalm 128. And in it is a similar invitation to life as what Jesus extends in Matthew 11. And perhaps if I can extend the metaphor, that Psalm 128 also has a word of encouragement to us, similar to the one that is on Rick Astley's phone. Psalm 128 opens, "Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours." Blessed are those who fear the Lord. The fear kind of can trip me up, trips us up. Not fear as in who are you afraid of, but rather the fear that sits on someone when they are in awe of, gazing out at the ocean for the first time, realizing that we stand on the banks of something that's much larger than we can quite imagine. The kind of fear that settles on us maybe when we watched the eclipse earlier this year, when I stood on the National Mall, as I know many of you did, and realized that I was watching something that I fully didn't understand, despite the free NASA eclipse glasses that I picked up at the NASA table just minutes earlier. Or the kind of awe that hits us when we see the sunrise on a new day after a long night that we weren't sure would ever end, but it has ended, and a new day is in front of us, and it's glorious in its pinks and purples and oranges as the sun makes its way above the horizon, and we are in awe of that. Blessed is the one who experiences that kind of awe in light of who God is, in light of God's love, and light of God's rescue and healing, in light of God's presence in our own lives. Blessed are those who are marked by that sensation and that experience. The verse goes on to say that those who walk in obedience, those are the people who are blessed. And we might read that in a militaristic or a domineering way, and to do so, it could be to misread the passage in large part because we miss the character of God. We gain a fuller sense of the psalm when we read this passage through the lens of Jesus. As we heard in Matthew 11, much of what it means to walk in obedience to God is to simply follow Jesus, to take up the yoke of Christ and to learn from him and order our lives around Jesus. And if we do that according to this psalm, then what we experience is a blessing, which is what Jesus notes as well. But that word blessing, sometimes I wrestle with that, to be frank. It's a curious word to us and to me as well. I think sometimes I read blessing and, I can ascribe something like godly luck. Man, I'm just blessed. Got a good parking spot. Didn't get a ticket. Blessed. Or I think of it as like having some special touch of the Spirit or some sacred or holy situation or person for that matter. But in the context of Psalm 128, what it means most often is having a quality of joy, especially a joy of life, a form of happiness that isn't dictated or predicated upon life's circumstances, but lingers with us despite circumstances, and sometimes in spite of the circumstances. What the psalmist is saying in those opening lines is that those who respond to God's love with awe, those are ones who experience joy in their lives. Maybe a way of reading the opening of Psalm 121 is this way: for those who find themselves in awe of God's great love, for those who follow in the gracious ways of the Lord, for them there is a life filled with joy that cannot be shaken. I want to repeat that. This is Watson translation. Psalm 128. For those who find themselves in awe of God's great love, for those who follow in the gracious ways of the Lord, for them there is a life filled with joy that cannot be shaken. That's the invitation to us. An invitation of awe, an invitation to follow, an invitation to recover life and life of joy. The middle section of this psalm talks about the ways that God would bless one's family. It speaks of marriage and one's wife and one's children. And there's a line in there about eating the fruit of one's labor and prosperity. In these passages, they can be hopeful verses for a married couple or for parents. They can seem like promises for the diligent worker, as though the psalmist is presenting a formula for family and vocational success. There's so much that could be said and probably should be said when we're facing the dissonance, though, between how we understand the Bible to be describing life on the one hand and our lived experience on the other. How do we live in that tension? And how do we find some measure of resolve in it if we don't have a family, if we're not married, or even if the one that we have is not quite what we had hoped for? In one of our devotionals from a couple of weeks ago, there was a poem by Wendell Berry that was reflecting on this very point. His poem invites us to consider that when we find ourselves in seasons that come with heartache, as well as mystery, as well as pain, that we can take comfort in the fact that our journey isn't over yet, and that the Almighty still holds our lives and our futures in His hands, that seasons of discouragement don't have the last word, and the Lord is still working for our good even when we don't see it. The thing is, sometimes when we follow the Lord and things don't turn out in the ways that we might describe as blessed, sometimes it seems like our labor doesn't yield prosperity. Sometimes it seems as though that our work is in vain. Sometimes marriages and families, they don't follow our planning. And in those moments, what do we make of the meaning of Psalm 128? I know that many of you and many of us have experienced that kind of disappointment in our lives, and may well be experiencing that kind of pain even now. The distance between what we believed what should happen and what did happen in our lives. I find myself without words, knowing how to comfort. When so much hope is dashed, words can be of little comfort. And yet let us listen to words from our brother Wendell Berry, from his poem Sabbaths. He says this: we travelers walking to the sun can't see ahead, but looking back, the very light that blinded us shows us the way we came, along which blessings now appear, risen as if from sightlessness to sight. And we, by blessing brightly lit, keep going forward, that blessed light that yet to us is dark. Closing verses of the psalm call us to seek the prosperity of Jerusalem, and to speak of our lives blessing our children's children. What begins with an invitation to follow the Lord, to live in awe of God's love and salvation, it ends with an invitation to have that life be lived to the benefit of others. The psalmist is saying to us, let your life and faith be of such character and quality that it has an impact on the city in which you live, on your neighborhood, on your community, or your world. And don't let it stop there. Let there be a generationally radiating blessing that emanates from your life to those around you. The psalmist won't let us view this invitation as one that is only to occupy our personal lives. God's work in our lives, it was just never intended to be only for our personal lives. To see God's healing and God's salvation as being only for me is to see the gospel as too small a thing. Jesus' work on the cross has cosmic implications and generational ramifications. As a church, our work is to see the rule and reign of Christ in every life and in every sphere of life. And this is a mission that for us is an ache to see that those that are far from Christ be brought near and to experience God's love, and is a work that labors to see God's justice and just kingdom find expression in systems and structures in the here and now. We work hard at the work of discipleship, praying that we might be a church where disciples then make disciples, a radiating and generational effect. And we work hard to see a just education system where there's educational equity, because we want to see children reading at grade level. Because we know that every child that can read at grade level has a better chance of seeing their children read at grade level. The work of God's kingdom is the work of justice and love and mercy, not just for us, but for our city. And not only for the here and now, but for those that will come behind us and after us. That's part of why we invest in the Angel Scribes Memorial Fund. Because that's how Angel invested. For the sake of our good, for the sake of God's glory. In the smack middle of Psalm 4, it says, yes, this will be the blessing for the one who fears the Lord. It's a proclamation and an invitation into life with God. A life filled with blessings, with life flourishing, and a life that is to be lived for the sake of others as well. The Message translates verse 4. It says, stand in awe of God's yes. On the one side of verse 4, the beginning of the psalm is an invitation to trust God and God's ways, to follow in the life-giving ways of the Lord. And on the other side of verse 4, the ending of the psalm is an invitation to let your God-directed life be a blessing to those around you. And in the midst of those two halves of the psalm is an appeal to stand in awe of God's yes. To embrace, to be embraced by, and to embrace the one who, in the words of Sir Rick, never give you up, never let you down, never gonna run around or desert you. Not gonna make you cry. Well, sometimes. Not gonna say goodbye or lie or hurt you. That's the invitation. To say yes to that God. For your sake, for the sake of our world. Let me pray for us.